and that this targeting was pervasive. And anybody, this is the other thing too, anyone that ever wants to say they don't believe me, do what I did. Do what I did. Campaign against a national intelligence agency and see what happens to you. See what happens to you. You don't actually have to believe me. You don't have to decide whether or not to believe me. Just stand up in your chains and move around a bit and then find out for yourself what happens. Assert your democratic rights, assert your freedoms, and find out what happens to you.
There are warriors with weapons, absolutely. But then there are the other kind. The ones in regular clothes, no uniforms, just receipts, timelines, and a stubborn refusal to simply shut up. Think of it this way. Soldiers fight over ground you can draw on a map. Activists and builders fight over the scaffolding you can't see. Code, policy, finance, about the stories we are told, and especially about the stories we are not told. My guest today, Suzie Dawson, is one of those second kind of warriors. New Zealand born, journalist, organizer, builder. She not only sparked a global #Unity for Julian Assange campaign, but she is building now a different kind of social media layer with her Pancake. That's a peer-to-peer social media platform, and it's not a theory, meanwhile it's practice. If you're new here, first of all, welcome. And a quick heads up. I make long form content. Some people say too long. Fair point. But complexity takes time. So do this for yourself. If life interrupts, just bookmark the interview and come back whenever you can focus. I put the chapters in here for a reason. Think of this as an antidote to the attention economy. And your engagement, the comments, the shares, even a timestamp you drop for others, that's what keeps these conversations alive and, frankly, a bit more immune to the algorithmic filters. If you want to go deeper than an interview can carry, the companion dossiers live on my Substack. In-depth investigations with receipts, timestamps, filings, leaked memos, and context that rarely pass the algorithmic filters. So let's zoom out for a moment to the frame that holds all of this together, because what follows hinges on context, and context matters. The context in Susie's story is that she didn't set out to be a public figure. It happened because New Zealand's politics and tech world kept colliding with her reporting and her organizing. She ended up leading an internet party for a stretch while essentially living in exile, and she kept making the same point. Surveillance and censorship aren't abstractions. They run like background apps in your daily life. Now, I know that some folks waved her off and said she left New Zealand and made up some stories. Right. Then in 2018, the State Service Commission inquiry landed. And it landed with a bang. It investigated the state's use of outside security contractors like Thomson and Clark and others, and it documented surveillance of activists and cozy, improper links with government clients. And that report didn't just make noise. It vindicated Suzie, and it confirmed what a lot of dissidents had already been saying for years. When the state wants distance, it outsources the thing it shouldn't be doing in the first place and calls it business as usual. Quick practical note before we roll. Some platforms block Russian IPs. Recording this interview meant jumping through relays, permissions, some odd routes that you might know. That's why you will hear a few scuffs in the audio. Treat them as fingerprints of the moment, not flaws. Infrastructure is political. It leaves marks. And keep in mind that this conversation is not a tech demo. Instead, it's all about what happens when you speak truth to power, and the power speaks or hits back. Softly at first, then not so soft. It starts with financial pressure and reputational hits. Then come the intimidations and the physical threats. Process as punishment. The low harm of always on surveillance. We are going to name tactics, not slogans, specifics. Then, right on cue, I mean, you couldn't script this better. About halfway, our connection cuts. Gone. Dead. We re-established a bit later and we left the break in. Because continuity under pressure is virtually part of Susie's story. They are basically the watermark of her life. One last frame to keep it in the back of your mind. Suzie often points to Kim.com, not for celebrity gossip, but as a case study in state overreach. There is a video with helicopters, armed squads, attack dogs, automatic rifles, and an illegal warrant. You can watch the original raid footage at the end of Susie's interview and ask yourself, today in 2025, because this case is still pending, it's still not over, with platform bans, bank debanking, private contractors acting as deputized muscle for the state, and the sheer brute force you will see in the clip. Do you really think all of this was just about a copyright case? Tell me what you see and let me know in the comments. So if you're interested in how the state crushes down on dissent and how this could impact your life, bookmark this interview now. Come back when you have time to sit with it and bring a notebook. Remember, warriors with weapons decide battles. Warriors with evidence decide stories. Tonight is about the latter. Suzie Dawson, what a pleasure having you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
A little bit of context. I came across your name in regards to, or I should say, I'm very much interested in decentralized social media. And I did some research, and talk liberation came up again and again and again. And finally, I was able to reach out to you. And I thought we talk about talk liberation, which we will. But then I did some research and I found out that the life of Suzie Dawson is, I would say, extraordinary. And to give the viewers a little bit of context, I have a list here in front of me. It's not a short list, but I think it's important to kind of flesh out who you are. And please correct me if I'm wrong. Okay?
Sure.
So, New Zealand-born journalist, activist, and technologist in relation to talk liberation. You left New Zealand in 2015, and if my information is correct, you went first to Berlin and you are now in Russia in exile, self-imposed exile.
Self-imposed exile is a very interesting term. I take it actually as a compliment because it's a term that has been used about Edward Snowden, about Julian Assange, and about myself. Um, I find it to be a ridiculous term because it sounds like, oh, we just up one day and decided it would be great to become an exile, and off we went to become exiles. It's ridiculous. It removes the other parties who are involved in the process from it and puts the focus just on the person who's experiencing the persecution rather than on those who are imposing the persecution, which results in the exile. So that's not a term I'm fond of. It's one that was used by the New Zealand Herald in an attempt to frame my situation in a way that, again, took the spotlight off those who were doing the persecuting and put it onto the persecuted.
And we will come back to that because it's a real prosecution. I fully agree. Now, a couple of key roles: Pancake founder, managing director, overseeing dozens of staff in 10 different countries. Again, we're going to talk about talk liberation a little bit later. Internet party leader in 2017, youngest woman ever to lead a registered New Zealand political party. Congratulations. Unity for J. My guess is Unity for J means something, J for Julian Assange. Is that right? But
Correct.
that's my guess.
Correct.
Okay. 3,000 volunteers. Again, achievement. Former party president, Internet Party New Zealand. Because I'm interested, what is or what was the Internet Party New Zealand?
Internet Party of New Zealand is a registered political party that was created by Kim.com, the internet entrepreneur, who's German Finnish in origin but moved to New Zealand. He also was persecuted for his support of WikiLeaks and was subjected to a US Department of Justice prosecution in the Eastern District Court of Virginia, which is the same court that was persecuting Julian Assange and also still is persecuting Edward Snowden. And Kim.com's home was raided on the 20th of January 2012 by FBI agents who flew to New Zealand and with 100 police officers, an attack helicopter, and dogs, raided his residence and threw him in jail. And as a result of court hearings related to that case, we discovered New Zealand's partnership with the NSA in the United States, the National Security Agency, and with New Zealand's sister agency, so to speak, the GCSB, in spying on 88, at least 88 New Zealand citizens. So Kim in 2014 founded the Internet Party, and I was a part of promoting that political campaign and involved from an independent media aspect. And then in 2017, I was appointed party leader of Internet Party and stood for election from Russia in the general election in New Zealand.
The name Kim came up a couple of times in my research. I believe his story is also one worth telling. Where or what is he doing now? Is he arrested? I
Kim
don't know.
has been under house arrest since 2012. Eventually, he got bail in 2012, and he has been on daily reporting and house arrest ever since. He's still fighting extradition to the United States. Unfortunately, recently he's had some very serious health battles and is doing his best to recover from that while still being subjected to ongoing extradition proceedings.
Incredible in a country like New Zealand, you know. Sometimes people ask me, Thomas, with all what's going on, where should we go? Should the first country that always comes up from others is should we go to New Zealand? Yeah. And then I heard your story, so I think people need to reconsider that first reflex.
New Zealand is a wonderful country. The land is incredible. The people are amazing. The food is great. But the politics are, the first word that comes to me actually is homicidal. The politics are psychotic, and largely because of the involvement of foreign countries like the United States, who have an outsized role in the domestic affairs in our country. Quoting David Farrar, who's very much on the political opposition from me, actually, but who's a famous New Zealand media figure, he said, "There is political espionage in New Zealand." And that's a well-known fact amongst media and politicians that countries from outside of New Zealand who are militarily powerful, such as the US and the UK and others, do have an active and very physical presence in New Zealand, and they do engage in political repression of New Zealand citizens.
If I'm not mistaken, New Zealand is part of the Five Eyes
Correct,
together with Australia. That
correct.
means intelligence sharing, this kind of things, yeah. And I heard you in an interview, but so the New Zealand government is not only spying on its people, on its own people, but they're also outsourcing the espionage. I think it was the FBI you said, or the NSA.
Well, it would have been NSA in the context of GCSB. It would be FBI in the context of NZSIS, which is the Security Intelligence Services in New Zealand. The FBI has just openly opened its first field office in New Zealand in the last couple of months. So it now has physical offices on the land of our country, an intelligence agency of a foreign government.
Yeah, but do they have any jurisdiction in New Zealand?
They certainly shouldn't. However, through these post 9/11 intelligence sharing agreements, international cooperation agreements, et cetera, look, they're all just spokes of the same wheel. That's what it comes down to. I'm sorry to sound so jaded or so extreme, but my sense of national identity has been very much rocked by my experiences because I understand now that we are taught that we have a national identity. We're taught that we're a sovereign entity. But when push comes to shove, there is a transnational military structure which maintains power regardless of who sits in parliament, of who wins an election, of who you vote for. These things are irrelevant to the supremacy of that core power structure. And it will continue. In fact, I'm hearing in my head from one of the Snowden files. It says, we are impervious to political perturbations. Those are the words of an NSA executive. We are impervious to political perturbations. So whether the left's in or whether the right is in, they are in, no matter what. And when you cross them, then you learn that lesson. You learn how real that is.
Yeah, that explains also why let's say the geostrategic position of the US didn't shift since the Second World War. It doesn't matter Democrats or Republicans in the power. But before we continue, so I would like to go through a couple of your let's say achievements, yeah, and then I would really like to hear what happened in a kind of step by step fashion, if you can, yeah. I'm now by major campaign and achievements. So co-created viral hashtag opposition also TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. What was the trended #1 in New Zealand and second worldwide? Then campaign, first social media influencer from 2012 to 2014 against New Zealand's mass surveillance agency. So you picked your enemies also carefully. Activist and promoter on major events. Moment of Truth event involved in major 2014 event featuring Kim.com, Glenn Greenwald, Edward Snowden, Julian Assange. What was that about, this Moment of Truth event in 2014?
It was 50% in connection with Snowden revelations, particularly information relevant to New Zealand and New Zealanders that was derived from files in the Snowden leaks, which Glenn Greenwald was reporting on, and which also tangentially impacted the Kim.com situation, but affected New Zealanders as a whole. Everybody in our country is affected by the things that we learned in those files. For example, at that event, Ed talked about how there was NSA facilities, physical buildings and infrastructure on New Zealand soil. They're registered assets of the State Department in the United States, but they're on, as we would say in Māori in New Zealand, on the whenua, on the New Zealand whenua, on our land. We are physically occupied by intelligence agencies of foreign countries. And again, this is not what we're taught about ourselves when we go to school, when we're growing up. We learn about Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud. We learn about New Zealand, a sovereign independent entity. We're told we have independent foreign policy. We're told we have human rights. We are taught that we have democratic freedoms and human rights. But when you start to scratch below the surface, you get a very different picture. The other 50% of what the Moment of Truth event was about was the September 2014 general election, which was the first election the Internet Party stood in under the leadership of the Honourable Laila Hare, who's an absolutely amazing warrior for truth and activism in New Zealand, um, long-standing wahine toa. Again, I keep wanting to use New Zealand terminology. Wahine toa, a woman warrior. She is a woman who has been fighting for human rights and social justice for a very long time in New Zealand. She was the first party leader. And if there's one thing I'm really proud about in terms of Internet Party, it's that I got to work with her and was supported by her and was able to support her in return. So some fantastic people took some really big risks to try and educate, first and foremost, the people of New Zealand about what is really going on and what was happening to us, and then to try and do something about it, which is the most important point. It's not enough just to study and to learn. It's not enough to know. You have to do. You have to act. You have to build.
Very true. I have one more chapter here, and that's media and recognition. High-reach journalism. Some of your articles apparently achieved more than 250,000 hits. Not so bad. WikiLeaks endorsement. Work consistently shared by Julian Assange between 2014 and 2019. I have a couple of media appearances from Sky News Australia, RT, NPR Australia, Radio New Zealand, and a number of publications in New York Zealand Herald, Huffington Post, Consortium News, etc., etc. Now, I do this very consciously. I really want to, I would like the viewers to understand who you really are. And lastly, I have here notable interviews conducted. It's a funny one. Well, funny. NSA whistleblower Bill Binney, then Ray McGovern and John Kiriakou, both of which I have interviewed, Daniel Ellsberg, Chris Hedges. Now, I saw an interview that I think both Ray McGovern and John Kiriakou both endorsed talk liberation, right?
John Kiriakou is the brand ambassador for Talk Liberation, and Ray McGovern is like my honorary grandfather. I love him so much. He's such a good person.
Yeah, amazing. Both of them, and very courageous. Now, that was to give a little bit of context and to introduce you to viewer who have probably never heard about you, same as me. A couple of months ago, well, about a year ago, I was not aware of you, which is a shame because, of course, I'm not, or we are here not in New Zealand. I guess in New Zealand the situation is different. But to the broader audience, probably your name, Suzie Dawson, but also Talk Liberation is relatively unknown. So if you feel comfortable and that as far as you're at liberty to tell, I would like to I would like you to talk us through what really happened to you in leading you to your, how shall I say, I no longer say self-imposed because you're absolutely right, it's not self-imposed. Your, yeah, your exile, very black and white. So where would you like to start?
Okay, so the first thing I'd do is I'd kind of reframe this a little bit because it's interesting for me to have this conversation about the things that I've done and been involved in being framed as achievements because to me they weren't they weren't something that I aspired to or that I set out as a goal. Talk liberation is a little bit different. Like I've consciously, my goal has been to create a social media company that will serve people and serve users and will put an end to the types of abuses that are going on against users. That's a conscious decision on my part that I've something that I've decided to get involved in and apply my skill set to with an ambition to be able to affect change. Activism, I did not aspire to. I did not plan on getting into. It was completely accidental. It was completely accidental. Um, I saw the Occupy movement was actually kind of the nascent Occupy movement was forming online even before the physical occupations on the ground. And I got involved first in an online capacity, and then I went to Occupy Auckland and I met some amazing people, beautiful, incredible people. And they thought like me and they believed the things that I believed. And they would take it comes back to what I was just saying before, doing something, building something, like not just having the knowledge or talking about stuff, but taking real concrete actions to build something. And we had a media tent there, and all the other people who had computer skills of any type um, congregated there. And so that became my natural home away from home. And it started with just the tiniest basic little things like we needed some Ethernet cables. Okay, I've got Ethernet cables. I'll run home and get some Ethernet cables and bring them down to the Occupy and help network some computers together. Like it's really small little things like this that led me down the pathway. It wasn't because I wanted to become someone or speak on panels or like I didn't want this was never in my head. I just wanted to help to provide what I could to contribute to something that I could see was real and concrete and actually affecting some positive change. So I want to set in New Zealand. I'm just going to keep using New Zealand terminology. I'm sorry. In New Zealand, we talk about the kaupapa. The kaupapa is the found, and these are Indigenous Maori words that I'm using. The kaupapa is the foundational understanding between people, or when you're embarking on something, when you're going to work on something together, you have this foundational understanding. For me, the kaupapa of my activism was to help people to contribute in a very physical way, contribute and help. It wasn't because I wanted a career change or I had some personal aspiration. So I just wanted to let you know. What you list as my achievements to me are things that are almost incidental that just happen to occur as a result of that motivation of just wanting to support people. We would say tautoko, the tautoko, the people around us, to show support and solidarity with the people around us. Um, and when I got involved at Occupy, I did not have the first clue in the world that we would have malevolent attention from police agencies, that I was completely oblivious to the concept of really even what an intelligence agency was. I didn't really understand what an activist was. When people first started describing me as an activist, I thought they were a bit loopy. I was like, I'm literally just a single mum from the suburbs. Like, I'm literally like dropping my kid at sports practice and coming down here to help you do your computer stuff. Like, and you're calling me an activist? Why are you calling me an activist? So it took a long time for me to accumulate the knowledge and the understanding of what was really going on. And it was through that combination of direct experience on the ground and then my own research as weird things started to happen in the course of the Occupy. And I started to understand there was more going on than what the eye could see. Then I started to learn. I started to learn from older activists who'd been through this in the 80s, been through this in the 90s. There's this all the topics we're discussing predate myself by generations, if not tens of generations. These things have been going on since time immemorial. People with power and money have wanted to maintain and grow their power and money and have been unlimited in the scope of their imagination of ways that they could do that, and immoral in their practices. And the more that I started to discover that there is this hidden control mechanism to which any of us can be subjected, in which all of our human rights go out the window, our democratic freedoms go out the window, the more indignant I became. And if I could describe myself through that whole period of that last 10 year, that 10-year period from like 2011 on, it would be righteous indignation because I just got more and more pissed off. I was like, what do you mean you're targeting, having a foreign power target our citizens and spy on them? What do you mean that that's supposed to be okay? No, it's not okay. And we're going to tell everybody about it, and then we're going to try and do something about it. And I guess had the foolhardiness that I didn't let the fact that these people had billions of dollars and thousands or tens of thousands of staff versus, me and six people on my media team. I didn't let that kind of um, dissuade me. And arguably I should have. I mean, I've had people say to me like, what did you expect? You know, you go up against these people, you're telling the truth loudly about these people. What did you expect? And at a certain point, I did become aware, like, oh my God, like this actually could result in some permanent harm, and not just to me, actually, but to other people connected to me. But at the same time, I really felt like sitting down and shutting up or giving in to them. It's like kind of like an abuser. Like it really, there's a lot of abuse dynamics in the relationship between citizen and state. And I really felt like if I just gave in, that I would be actually empowering them to go and target the next person and target the next person because look, it worked with Suzie. Like, and I that didn't sit right with me at all. I didn't want to feel like I was tacitly participating by giving them the net result that they wanted. And ultimately, yeah, that cost me a lot, and it cost my kids more. And I mean, my kids lost their friends. I never ever talk about my children, so this is going to be quite rare for you to have this. But my children lost their friends, they lost their schools, they lost their peer group, they lost their access to my family. We didn't see anyone in my family for 9 years. 9 years. Last year was the first time that we saw my parents and my family because they came here and stayed with us finally. Um, and I mean, we weren't estranged from my family. They've actually been relentlessly supportive of me throughout. but they're older, and asking them to up and come to Russia on, was not the easiest thing in the world to do. And I know I'm chopping and changing in the time frame here, but I just want to make the point that, um, yeah, I was abused by my state because I exercised my democratic freedoms and my human rights, and I tried to extend those to others. I tried to work for the preservation of those rights for other people, and I'm still doing that. And that's not something I can say I will definitively achieve within my lifetime. I probably won't. But as Ray McGovern and people like that will tell you, it doesn't actually matter. We have to try. We have got to. We have got to try. Capitulation is and surrender is not an option, because when you surrender to an abuser, they just get a free ride to do it 10 times worse. So we have to push back against the coming dystopia, as Julian talked about in his book Cypherpunks. Um, okay, do you want me to cut back and give you a proper explanation of how I got from Media 10 to Occupy to Exile? If so, I'm happy to do it.
It's your show, Susie. I'm happy with everything you give us. I think it's very important for people to realize. For people, I mean, most people never leave their country. Most people never leave their town, even. Yeah. So it's very really important to understand things that only someone who lives somewhere else, and not just for a year or two, but permanently, experiences. Exactly like you said, old or young, you lose your personal network, and you only realize how important this personal and professional network is when you lose it, when you're suddenly in a country and you do not have access to this, to your personal environment, to your friends, to your whole proximity. Not to talk about the culture change, the new start, etc., etc. And then you, as a single mom, continue with your journey. Not only continue with your journey, but you also build on it. Yeah. So maybe let's go back to wherever entry point you want to re-enter your story.
Okay, so in 2016, it was the first time I ever put myself on camera and talked into the camera, was when I made a documentary called Diary of a Person of Interest, because I needed people to understand. I had applied for asylum here in Russia, and I needed people to understand what I'd been through and what was happening to me and why it was happening. So I recommend that if you really want a blow by blow of everything I was involved in, everything I did that led to Exile, that you go ahead and watch that. It's not an easy watch. It's I tried to rewatch it again recently for the first time in many years, and it was difficult for me to watch. It talks about a lot of dark things, but it is the God's honest truth of what happened to me. And when I say it was the first time I put myself on camera, that's because in all of my journalism from 2011 until 2016, I interviewed many well known political figures, many well known media figures, and I covered many, many live events in New Zealand. But I never put myself on camera. I always had my camera facing away from me, focused on whoever I was interviewing. And so if you're an intuitive person, and if you look really carefully at, actually, you're a behavioral expert. You should be able to do it better than anybody else. If you look at me in Diary of a Person of Interest in that 2016 documentary, you can actually see the combination of, like, it's not really terror. It's more like there's like a steely grit and a determination to go ahead and talk about these things, but at the same time, I'm just hating the fact that I'm having to do it. And actually, someone extremely cool commented to me recently, like, in that video, you can actually hear me, but every time before I say something, I do a little sigh. It's like, and then I start talking. And this is the sigh is, I can't believe I have to talk about this. I can't believe this is
I
happening.
saw
I
it.
can't
I
believe
saw it
this is
yesterday,
happening to me.
actually.
Oh, you saw it, so you know what I'm talking about.
I saw it yesterday, and what I took away from is you spent a larger part in the second half of the documentary outlining exactly the means that the state used in order to, how shall I call it? It's
Terrify me,
harass you,
horrify me,
terrify you.
terrify me,
Yeah. So you
petrify.
don't
That's the word. to
Yeah.
petrify me.
I will put the link to this documentary in the description. Yeah, but for our viewers right now, give us a couple of things just to just to make the viewers understand. It's not a light decision that you take your kids, pack your
Oh
kids, and go
God, no.
to first to Germany and then to Russia. So uh, I'm not sure. Should we first follow the timeline and then go there, or shall we right away jump
Look,
into this?
we're all over the place here, but I kind of feel like that's okay, to be honest with you.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, fine with me.
um, So, in terms of the documentary, it very much takes a journalistic approach in the sense of I really systematically lay out, like, here is all the techniques, here is all the parties that are involved, here is what they do and how they do it. And you're right that you've noticed that there really is like kind of two definitive halves. The first half is the story of me and what I went through and what happened. The second half, I'm actually in that second half. I'm not making it for a viewer or for a member of the public. I'm actually making it for other targets of the state. I'm actually trying to help them to understand what's happening to them and how they can react to the targeting in ways that will be less harmful than otherwise, because it's a very emotional thing. So we're going back to the media tend to occupy Auckland. Um, Everything was fine. I was coming to general assemblies. Everything seemed fine. The occupation was a good space. It was a healthy and positive space. We had a lot of homeless people. We looked after them. We cared for them. That was fine too. We had some criminals. We looked after them as well. Everybody got fed. Everyone got looked after. We had cool marches. We had cool protests. We had little teach-ins and sit-ins and educational spaces. And it was really, I felt, a very beautiful, transformational place. And in particular, I became very close with the other members of my media team. We had an independent media team. And one of the guys there, Red Star 309Z, he was live streaming. And it was the first time I'd ever heard of live streaming and the first time I'd ever seen anybody live stream. It was completely new. Nobody did it at all. But here's this one guy who's live streaming. And he and I got to be really good friends. And he and others convinced me to get on Twitter. And if you go back to my original Twitter account, which was at Endarken, Endarken, there's actually a tool called, I think it's called First Tweets or something. You can look it up online and it shows you what's the first ever tweet of a Twitter account. And if you put my handle into first tweets, you see that the very first tweet I ever sent on that Twitter account was a statement of a personal statement of solidarity in support of Occupy Oakland port shutdown, which was in the first week of November of 2012. And I used Twitter for the sole reason of showing solidarity to other occupiers in the Occupy movement and hanging out with Red Star while he was live streaming, he got me to do what we call tweet jockeying. So I would be tweeting on Twitter what was happening on the ground that he was filming on his stream, and I would be sending his stream links out. And we were literally the only people in New Zealand doing this. Like, literally, it was him and me and no one else. Because at this time, I mean, it was cost prohibitive. We used to have to come up with like $150 to buy data so that he could have enough data to even stream it all. From there, we hooked up with Global Revolution Live, also known as Global Rev Live, and that was an independent media crew who were taking the live streams from all of the occupations in the world and putting them all into one dashboard where viewers could see on one web page. You could watch Norway and Finland, you could watch Australia, you could watch New Zealand, you could watch Occupy Wall Street, New York City, you could watch Occupy Oakland, you could watch Occupy Denver. They're all consolidated into one view. You could actually view and participate in all the occupiers in the world through a single website. And so from that point, we made a lot of friends with other independent media, people on media teams all around the world. And then they started saying, well, Suzie, can you blog something? Can you write something up? And so I learned to take my pictures and my tweets and embed Red Star's live streams and write up a little synopsis of whatever had happened on any given day. And we created a website called occupysavvy.com, which is now occupysavvy.wordpress.com. And we started, each time we had an event, after the event, we would publish all the materials from that event on this website. And then that got picked up and circulated all around the whole global Occupy movement and became a very well-known blog within the movement. So that's the leap from I'm just plugging in some Ethernet cable to I'm now tweet jockeying for a live streamer to I'm now in digital publishing and blogging. And of course, at the same time, I was following and supporting WikiLeaks and Chelsea Manning and all sorts of related people. And so I started microblogging and aggregating news about all of these topics and then publishing that on the blog as well. So this is like the tiny little beginning seeds of my independent journalism. Well, what I didn't realize is that all of that was being taken notice of by some pretty nasty, nefarious, and well-resourced figures, and that was being noticed internationally as well as domestically. And that started to manifest itself in my life in nasty ways. So in December, okay, so let's like timeline. September, we've got like the beginnings of Occupy Wall Street and the beginning of the Occupy New Zealand group, which I was a part of and still probably am if I can never access my Facebook account again. That was September 2011. October 15th, Occupy Auckland first day, actually meeting other people and participating. November, port shutdown in Oakland, the first emergence of riot police and tear gas and that kind of stuff going on. December, my house got broken into for the first time. Unfortunately got broken into a lot of times after that, but the first time, and it was broken into in a very dodgy way, like the glass had been smashed from the inside, not the outside, and things like this. And then I started getting followed everywhere, followed by people in vehicles, followed by people on the street, people photographing me everywhere I went. I'm just some chick from the suburbs. Like I'm not like some I'm not like a award-winning journalist or I'm nobody. And I've got these teams of people following me everywhere. And that's when I started to go, hang on a second, something's not right here. Like there's something very dodgy about this. Um, but I still was naive. I didn't have a clue that it was intelligence agencies or international agencies. None of that would ever occur to me in a million years. Instead, I actually thought to myself, oh, well, maybe someone's dealing drugs at the Occupy. Maybe, like, I put it down to local cops. That was how I justified it to myself. I was like, yeah, well, maybe they're just trying to catch someone who's got a warrant for their arrest or something. Somehow I've gotten involved in something without realizing it. Um, until the following month, January of 2012, when all of a sudden there's FBI helicopters flying into our country and raiding Kim.com's mansion with his wife, 9 months pregnant with twins, and hauling him off to jail for a crime that isn't actually a crime in New Zealand, copyright infringement. It's a civil liability. It's not a criminal liability. And the 20th of January was when the raid happened. The 23rd of January, 3 days later, Occupy Auckland was raided by riot police. And I was there on the day, as were all of my media team. I had to watch a whole bunch of people getting hauled up and arrested, including most of my friends. And one of the guys on our media team was filming and taking photos. And he realized that the police had the same badge numbers on. They had Z557, same badge numbers. And he's like, what is this? Why, for what possible reason would our police have fake badge numbers? And we've come to believe now, which we didn't realize on the day, that that's because they weren't our police. They were the same FBI team that had come in and raided Kim's house, had stayed the weekend and then come and done the Occupy Auckland raid. And they'd been given police uniforms and identical badge numbers. But we got that footage into the mainstream press in New Zealand. It became a whole national scandal. It was on the news, the fake Z557 badges, and they launched an official investigation, which took 1 year to do exactly nothing. And then at the end of the year said, oh, it was the actions of a few rogue police officers, and we've dealt with it as an internal matter. That's the official explanation for the Z557 cops. But at that point, something was really rotten in the state of Denmark, and we had worked out that something really rotten was going on. And now, one thing I want to be really clear about, because there's been lots of like smears and efforts to undermine me over the years, and one big thing that they always ignore in their smears is the fact that I wasn't the only one who was targeted. My entire media team was targeted. Every single person who was involved with me in promoting Occupy movement was targeted. All of them targeted on the road, same issues with their cars and vehicles, some of them arrested, one of them thrown in a mental hospital and drugged. Like, we've had horrific things across the board happen to us. Some of us beaten up by cops, repeatedly arrested for no reason, all manner of different methods of targeting were employed against my entire media team. Three members of which have gone on public record and talked about their experiences with me and at the Occupy and the things that have happened to them, as well as being aware of what happened to me. Other famous media figures like Martin Bradbury from the Daily Blog have made public statements about knowing that I was being targeted when I was in New Zealand because Martin was working with me on the GCSB campaign. So it was never a secret. What was happening to me was not a secret. It was known in the public arena. New Zealand journalists knew about it. Political figures knew about it. They knew about it while I was still in New Zealand. And the reason I'm hammering this in is because there's this general impression that I just upped and left one day and then came up with this story. But if you go back and read my Twitter history, I was tweeting about it in real time from New Zealand. Literally, today this happened to me. Tomorrow, the next thing happens to me. Like, it's all there. And not just on Twitter, on other platforms as well. Um, so I just wanted to explain that because I'm not like an island at all. They like to reduce me to being an island because that's how they can perpetuate the smears. But the reality is that I was just one part of a whole web of activists and independent media that this was happening to, and that this targeting was pervasive. And anybody, this is the other thing too, anyone that ever wants to say they don't believe me, do what I did. Do what I did. Campaign against a national intelligence agency and see what happens to you. See what happens to you. You don't actually have to believe me. You don't have to decide whether or not to believe me. Just stand up in your chains and move around a bit and then find out for yourself what happens. Assert your democratic rights, assert your freedoms, and find out what happens to you. So from the beginnings of 2012, the FBI show up in New Zealand and things start getting really, really weird. That was 2012. I started to investigate a couple of things. So the first thing is my blogging now became investigating the FBI presence in New Zealand. So now I'm not just aggregating news about the movement. Now I'm actually doing I look back on it now and I think, oh my God, I didn't have very much skill actually at all. It was all heart and no skill. But I started just putting all of the pieces of the puzzle together, like aggregating the official reporting plus the independent reporting, and then giving my own analysis and sharing the information that I was privy to because I was involved in the same circles that were all tied into this. And then later that year, I want to say it was August 2012, somewhere around there, the news broke about the NSA having, at the request of GCSB, targeted 88 New Zealand citizens. Now, that's a very misleading revelation because they don't just target a person. They target everybody around that person that they communicate with in any capacity, and then everybody around them as well. So if you're targeting 88 people, you're actually not. You're probably targeting, okay, let's say 88 people know 50 people. What's that? 4,000 plus in the first concentric circle. What is it now in the second concentric circle? Now we're talking about 200,000 people. And we're talking about 200,000 people in a country of, at that time, like 4 million. Now 5. I always get shit when I say that it's 3 or 4 million people, but it was when I was growing up in the 80s. But 200,000 people are being spied on. Now, that's a significant percentage of the entire New Zealand population is having their personal data and communications sucked into the NSA spy web, and it's being delivered on a platter by our national spy agencies who had no mandate whatsoever to spy on their own citizens, let alone hand over the data of our citizens to a foreign government. Like, on what level is any of that okay? And where are the democratic freedoms and rights that we're promised and taught that we have, and that's why we're better than the other countries, because these are the things we have that the other countries don't have, and that's why we should have the sense of superiority? No, it's all hocus pocus nonsense. We don't have those things. And I'm just one example out of many to evidence that we don't have those things. So, somewhere around September of 2012, I had the brilliant idea because now for the first time I had a bad guy. I had an understanding of who's been doing this stuff to us. And the bad guy was the GCSB, Government Communications Security Bureau, New Zealand's NSA. So, me being me, I decided to start hashtag GCSB, and then I decided to tweet all day, every day, information about the crimes these people had been committing against our citizenry. And in the meantime, I leveraged every single personal relationship that I had to demand that we create a national campaign focused on this point. And Martin Bradbury was one of the first who I mentioned. He's known as Bomber, actually, Citizen Bomber in New Zealand. Very, like, for decades, long-standing independent media journalist, radio host, music television host, very, very, very well-known personality in New Zealand. And to his credit, he's like, "Fuck yeah, let's get them, let's do it." And worked with him actually on the creation of the Daily Blog, which is something most people don't know about. Which was our vision was to take the model that we've used for Occupy New Zealand of bringing representatives from all of these different special interest groups together and creating a consolidated force that we could turn into a mass movement. That's how the Daily Blog was started, based on the same premise. And so we started to get traction.
Good. A little note, we were just interrupted, the connection. We restarted a little while later. As you can see, the light situation on my end at least has completely changed. And the last thing that I still remember was you step into the footstep of giants. This is what still stuck in my memory, Suzie. Can you pick it up from there?
Sure, sure. So I just wanted to make it really clear that we are all part of a bigger community, and it's not about just one of us. And what I was saying is that these achievements, as you frame them, or experiences, as I would frame them, um, are not just because I'm some genius or a fool, but because I was walking in the footsteps of giants. I was studying the actions of people who I admired, who believed in the same causes that I did, and I was trying to take actions in support of those. Um, Out of it really comes down to solidarity. Solidarity is lifeblood. Solidarity is what keeps us all going and alive and able to cope with the things that we go through, is the solidarity of other people. And actually, you mentioned before how difficult it is to have your community ripped away from you when you're going to a new country, a new place. And what I found is that the people in my life who I expected to support me often didn't, and the ones who I never thought would support me did. So you learn about the people around you when you face some serious adversity in your life, and you learn to lean on and work with those who emerge that may be the ones you don't expect, but at the end of the day are the right ones. And I was very, very lucky that going through what I was going through in New Zealand, people who knew more than me and had more resources than me um, worked out what was happening. I'm talking about Edward Snowden here. I'm talking about Julian Assange. They took note of what was happening to me, and they took actions to support me. They took actions to shine a spotlight on me because that spotlight helped to keep me safe. It really did. And even though I preferred to work anonymously, and our media team did work anonymously in the first few years, eventually the targeting of me was so pervasive and becoming so dangerous that it required having a spotlight on me and people knowing who I am in order to um, raise the risk calculus for those who were targeting me. The more public I was and the more support I had from significant people, the more difficult it was for those who were hurting me to keep hurting me. And so I'm very lucky. I consider myself to be a lucky person, because without that support and without that solidarity, things could have gone a much worse path. Um, I was told when I was in New Zealand, by someone who has been through exactly what I've been through and worse, um, to leave, to go. Specifically, I was told go to Berlin. That's where our people are. Um, and at first, I thought that suggestion was nuts, crazy. Of course, I can't go to Berlin. What are you talking about? Um, but I was having physical attacks. I was having very scary. How do you call? Well, I don't even know what the terminology is. Vehicular interference. I was having, my oil cap removed on my car, and my car like bursting into flames when I'm driving down the road. I was being chased by vehicles. I was being like pushed. Had vehicles try and push me off the road. I had a series of really terrifying, horrible experiences. And at the same time, I was getting a lot of death threats. I was getting death threats on social media and by email. And the ruling government, who had been persecuting journalists and activists in New Zealand, won re-election in September of 2014. And that meant I was staring down the barrel of another 3 years minimum of those same people in power being able to continue doing those things to me and to others. And that's why I finally made the decision. I was like, I can't keep going through this. I can't stay here. It's not gonna it's non-viable to live in a constant state of terror and persecution. Um, and so, yeah, I sold my house, packed everything up, and moved to Berlin. And I did it under the cover of going on a holiday. I literally went to a travel agent and booked a holiday and bunny hopped our way across Asia and to Europe, staying with friends along the way, and then settled down in Berlin. And really, really hoped, genuinely hoped that in Berlin we were going to have a normal life again, that the kids could go to school and I could get a job and that we could return to some type of normalcy. But unfortunately, I wasn't allowed a moment's peace, and they continued to target us. Um, to be fair, they didn't target us as maliciously in Berlin as they did in New Zealand. I didn't feel in Berlin that I could be killed at any moment. I didn't feel that, which I certainly did feel in New Zealand. Um, but they made life as difficult for me as they possibly could. And after I came to Russia for a short visit, and at the end of 2015, once I came back to Germany, then they got really nasty. They got pretty nasty. Um, and at that point, I realized, okay, if I stay in
If you say
Berlin,
they, sorry, if you say they,
you want to know who the they is?
yeah, if you say they, who are they? Was
So,
it in the
so
German?
the very first day that I
No, 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 no,
landed,
no. In Germany. I mean,
yep,
in
yep, yep.
Germany.
The very first day I landed in Germany, I had what I assume are police agencies or German intelligence agencies openly photographing me, following me, stalking me from day one, literally from day one, in our hotel room, like in our hotel lobby, in the vicinity of us always. I overheard like they were on the phone actually talking about me and things like this, and it was very obvious. Now, I don't know. I've never worked inside these agencies. I don't know what their processes are. I don't know what happens between New Zealand agencies and US agencies that they go, okay, this woman's going to Germany. Now we're gonna. I don't know what the handover process is I guess what I'm trying to say. But it's clear that there is some kind of handover process, and it just became, rather than being stalked by New Zealanders, now I'm being stalked by Germans. And yeah, and there was um, overt and covert targeting of me in Germany. Just like I had in New Zealand, I always had vans with blacked out windows parked outside my house. Like um, I had that also in Germany, literally 24 hours a day outside my apartment that I rented there. I had that same type of physical surveillance. But I also had the photographers, like literally me and my kids going to the markets and photographers jumping out with big cameras taking photos right in my face of me. Like, I still to this, I can only speculate at what their rationale is because I don't actually know. I don't know if it's that they want you to know that you're under surveillance that they do that. I don't know if it's some kind of psychological
Intimidation.
warfare. Yeah, I don't know if I don't know what their motives are, but I can just tell you what it's like to be on the receiving end of it, which is extremely unpleasant. And after, like I said, after we came to Russia for a short trip and we went back to Germany, they doubled down on all of it. They were obviously very unhappy that I'd come to Russia. They did not like that. Um, and in a very strange twist of events, when I decided to leave Germany and come back to Russia, they actually did stop me at the border when I was getting on the plane. And it's very odd. It's very odd because you would think that you'd be questioned coming in. We got questioned leaving. And all they wanted to know from me is, when are you coming back to the EU? And I just showed them my return ticket and said, look, I have a return ticket. They're like, when are you coming back to the EU? I'm like, I have a return ticket. It's right here. Like, when are you coming back to the EU? They just kept pushing them down the same question. When are you coming back? When are you coming back? When are you coming back? Because I think they were concerned. I think they were concerned that I would go to Russia and stay. And the more vehemently they pushed me on that point, the more I was thinking, oh my God, I don't want anything to do with you people ever again. I don't want to be near you or subjected to you ever again. I'm out. That's it. Finished. I've tried very hard to settle down, live a normal life. I haven't been allowed to do it, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life under your thumb. That's it. And so it came to Russia. And at the same time, as coming to Russia, events in New Zealand were unfolding that led to a lot of revelations that put into context my experiences. For example, I had put in OIA requests to the Office of the Prime Minister trying to get to the bottom of some of what had been happening to me. And those OIA requests had been forwarded by the Prime Minister's office to the GCSB. There was GCSB stamps on the documents when they came back. They refused to confirm or deny that I was a target. That's the official status as relates to me personally. They will not confirm or deny. They did admit having open source intelligence on me, but they won't admit to anything that they obtained by other means. Um, and at the same time, New Zealand was passing a series of extremely draconian security laws, in particular laws which would allow them to revoke the passport of a New Zealand citizen uh, arbitrarily, provided that that New Zealand citizen was deemed a threat to national security. And at the same time as that, the TPPA No Way movement, which I've been extremely involved in for many years, was deemed by New Zealand police to be a threat to national security. And they were raiding the homes of activists in New Zealand. So I was staring down again the barrel of the Prime Minister's office referring my complaints to the GCSB, who would neither confirm nor deny. as they gave themselves the power to revoke New Zealand passports based on a definition that they themselves engineer and supply. They actually they actually revoked the definition of the term threat to national security and said that it was up to the police commissioner and attorney general to determine whether or not someone was a threat without any actual description of what constituted a threat. And so as these things just piled up one on top of the other, I just got to the point where I realized it's not safe for me to travel. Like it's not, I can't just be hoping that I can get through the airport when with my two kids. Like I just can't do that. Like we need stability. We need to be able, we're not criminals. We don't commit crimes. I've been in Russia for 10 years. I haven't got a parking ticket. I haven't got anything. I'm a law-abiding person, but I could never know if I would still have a passport the next year, if I would be able to travel on the next flight that I took. And that was why I applied for asylum in Russia. So, yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, I've skipped a half a dozen movements I was involved in there, but it doesn't really matter. It was all the same thing, which is causes that we cared about that were impacting our country. And the only way that we could fight back was to use our voices to circulate information and to try and organize our fellow citizens to make a difference. And sometimes we got very close, sometimes we really had impact, and sometimes we didn't have impact. It's a mixed bag. I would never say that it's a success or a failure, but it's really important. I still believe it's extremely important to try. It's extremely important to try.
Hmm. How did you, to which extent were you able to rebuild your life in Russia? And I understand you are in the process for requesting asylum. So how did that work out?
Well, when I came to Russia, it was almost unheard of to be a Westerner um, in Russia applying for asylum. Um, Nobody could believe that I was there with a New Zealand passport asking for asylum and saying that I'm in fear of my life. And uh, this, aside from Ed's case, um, and I think there's one other case I'm aware of which predates mine by about 20 years. There hadn't been anyone else. So the immigration service was baffled. All the officials that I dealt with were completely baffled. I was lucky that I got a great attorney, a great asylum attorney who was extremely supportive and really went the extra mile for us. Um, but I also faced systematic interference. Um, so the head of the UN Refugee Agency in Moscow was a woman called Svetlana Ganashkina, who's actually an extremely famous human rights activist in Russia. Unbeknownst to me, she had been exposed in WikiLeaks documents and WikiLeaks publications for her activities with the US ambassador here in Moscow. And unfortunately, when I went to apply for asylum, the thing at the top of the form, it says, "Have you been recognized by the UN Refugee Agency as a refugee?" And I hadn't, so off I went to the UN Refugee Agency here in Moscow and found myself delivered to the desk of Svetlana Ganashkina. And she sat there and she took every single photocopies of every page of my passport, my kids' passports, I had about 200 pages of documentation of what. That's another thing people don't realize is actually how much evidence I compiled of what was happening to me, from mechanic reports to photographs to like just everything was very, like I said, a lot of it unfolded in real time on social media. But I had a lot of supplementary evidence as well. So I took all of that with me. She photocopied every single page, literally personally. Didn't have a secretary do it. She sat there right in front of me, photocopied every single page. And then she looked at me and she said, "This is a direct quote." She said, "I don't like Julian Assange." And I was like, "What?" She said, he published me in the WikiLeaks. And I thought, oh shit. Oh shit. Here I am, literally begging for my life to this woman. And of course, all through my file is WikiLeaks and Ed Snowden and everything else. And she hates my guts because she hates Julian's guts. And sure enough, I was denied refugee status. And because I was denied refugee status, that meant that I couldn't tick the box on my asylum application. That meant that I couldn't go through the internationally accepted UN asylum process. And that meant that I instead was put under a Russian state law asylum process, which is a whole completely different kettle of fish to what Ed and Julian went through. So, in both Ed and Julian's cases, they were recognized by the UN Refugee Agency as being refugees. They got refugee status, they went through the UN asylum process, and were processed that way. Now, all of a sudden, I find myself in a process which no one had gone through before, and which I'm completely blind as to the ramifications or implications of. And I'm just really lucky that um, Russia didn't toss me to the wolves. They didn't turf me out. But nor did they give me special treatment or consideration. So I have had to be like any other migrant and go, sit in the queues and in the lines and whatnot and go through the processes on and off for about 8 years, and eight years of that, of findings and appeals and findings and appeals and findings and appeals. Um, so yeah, it was a really really lengthy process, but simultaneously I was able to rent an apartment and start to build a community of people around me, build relationships around me, make friends. I want to say learn the language. I did study the language for a year, and I can speak enough Russian to get by, but I would be too embarrassed to say that I speak Russian because I don't. I don't. It would be disrespectful to Russian people to claim that I'm a Russian speaker. But yes, I can get through the supermarket and the taxi ride and the grocery, the restaurants, etc. Um, and yeah, it was for a long time. It was very isolating, absolutely. But I was very honest with everybody around me about exactly what my situation was, why we were in that situation. And I mean, most importantly, I was free to continue my work without being subjected to daily persecution. And that means an enormous amount. It took me a long time to be able to become accustomed to that freedom, actually. Took me, I think it took me about my first 6 months here before I could really breathe and know that I was okay.
In what kind of world live we where someone from New Zealand has to go to Russia in order to be able to breathe freely? I mean, the global situation is so twisted at this moment, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the images that we are having or that we have fed from Russia is equally twisted, right? So, if you can elaborate, how is life in Russia for you?
Um, when I first got here, I had a head full of the same propaganda that everybody else did. Um, I expected it to be dangerous and dirty and scary, but I was just hoping that I wouldn't be targeted in the same way I had been before. And I got here and discovered this this whole new world that I had never had any inkling of whatsoever. Where the streets are clean, where as a woman you can walk down the streets at any time of day or night, and nobody will interfere with you. Nobody will catcall you. No one will approach you. No one will accost you. Which I mean, coming from New Zealand, I couldn't do that in Auckland. I couldn't walk down Queen Street or K Road in Auckland Central as a woman in the nighttime and feel safe. But I can do that in Moscow. So that was the first thing that I noticed was, well, first thing I noticed was the cleanliness. Everything is spotless. You can eat off the streets. Where I come from, there's broken beer bottles and trash, and it's dirty. It's just a fact. The city is dirty. The countryside's beautiful, but the city is dirty. Um, Moscow is not like that. Total opposite. Completely spotless. So clean and safe. And then the next thing I started to realize is that everybody loves Westerners and they love Western culture. So all of a sudden I'm realizing, hang on, there's hamburger joints and they're playing Elvis Presley songs and they're sitting in Cadillacs for like their restaurant table is a Cadillac and they're sitting in the Cadillac eating their burger like it's 1950s USA. Like I just none of that. I could never have imagined any of that. Um, and the food is just clean, organic food. No Monsanto chemicals. No, none of the stuff that we're subjected to. No in the West. No GMO foods. No fake ingredients. No chemically lab produced meat or whatever. It's just to be honest, my enduring impression was that it was like New Zealand that I grew up in the 1980s, because there was a New Zealand that was sovereign and independent, and there was a New Zealand that was clean and green. Um, and I grew up in that New Zealand, but that New Zealand got taken away from us in the 90s through a series of political and trade deals. And then that got exacerbated in the OOs through the first John Key National Government in 2008. New Zealand in the 80s actually left the Five Eyes alliance. The Five Eyes became the Four Eyes because the New Zealand people were fighting for a nuclear-free New Zealand. They were refusing to allow US nuclear warships into New Zealand waters, as well as they were fighting an extremely important anti-racist, anti-apartheid movement in support of Nelson Mandela and South Africa, and that's the heritage that we have, um, but that was lost, and that's part of the heritage that we've been fighting to try and get back. Um, and in many ways, Russia now reminds me of that New Zealand. Like it has the local manufacturing that we used to have in New Zealand. Like it has the locally owned businesses. You go down to the dress shop down the road, and it's owned by the local dressmaker and things like this. Like that. That's the New Zealand I grew up in, but it's not the New Zealand that we ended up with. And that's probably my biggest fear for Russia, actually, and something I think Russian citizens don't understand is how much they have to lose. Um, they don't tend to see so much what they have, but because they're always told that they're less than, and so they think that they are less than. But I look at them and I think, oh my God, you still own your land, you still own your houses. You don't have to fear that your kids will grow up as renters for the rest of their life. Everybody here owns a house, and usually a house and an apartment, um, and they they still own their country. And in all honesty, the thing Russians are always asking me, they say, why do they hate us? Why does the West hate us? And the honest to God answer, based on 10 years of living here and everything I've come to know, my answer is because they don't own you. That's why they hate you. Because they don't own you.
Spot on.
They don't own your land. They don't control your housing. They don't own your medicine. They don't own your science. They don't own your intelligence agencies. They don't own your police agencies. They don't own your educational facilities. People here have master's degrees and no debt. You can't have a master's degree and no debt in the West. Are you kidding me? People here go to the hospital because they're sick and then they walk out with no bill. You can't do that in the West. So, in terms of the way that the society functions and the services that it provides for the people, it is light years ahead. No, you know what? It's not light years ahead. ahead of the West. What it is how the West used to be before the West cannibalized itself. That's what Russia is. And that's why it has to be protected for exactly that reason.
I remember seeing when Tucker Carlson was in Moscow. Of course, he did the interview, but he also filmed him walking through Moscow. And I was smiling at his kind of, I don't know, surprise when he found, hey, the supermarkets are not empty, exactly as you said. The streets are clean, there's security, I mean, it reminds me very much uh, about what's going on in China right now. I mean, this mass propaganda against China, yeah. Whilst China is really light years ahead, but it's the same rhetoric, yeah. So it's the in-group, out-group, the dehumanization of the enemy, because both Russia and China are officially the West's enemies, right? But coming back to you, and maybe now it's a good segue into talk liberation. So how did this merge your private life, your life in Moscow? I don't know when you started talk liberation. Was that already when you were in Germany or in New Zealand, or did it start in Russia? So how did talk liberation enter your life, and at which stage?
Talk Liberation was formed as the entity, the business entity to underpin the registration of Pancake, the social network. And I came up with the idea of Pancake towards the end of 2020. And then in 2021, I and a group of friends who volunteered for the project, because we had nothing. We just had ourselves, our ideas, and our willingness to work. We didn't have millions of dollars or backers or anything like that. We came together and we launched a crowdfunder at the end of January in 2021 to try and raise enough funds to be able to begin the Pancake project. And we were very successful in raising those funds actually much more quickly than we expected because there was widespread public support for there to be an alternative to big tech platforms because everybody feels so abused by big tech platforms, which they are exploited by at every level by big tech. Um, and so we researched what jurisdictions we could register in that had the best hope of being able to maintain a stable foundation for a business to operate in the social media sphere. We came up with Cook Islands and from a data perspective with Iceland. And so we registered companies in both and called it Talk Liberation for obvious reasons. It's all about freedom of expression. It's about liberating our ability to talk and have conversations with each other, but also the opportunity to talk about methods of liberation, to be able to collaborate on campaigns, to be able to do something, take action, build something. You know, the same points that I was making earlier. It's about trying to provide ways for people to reinstitute human rights that we've been promised for ourselves. And that leads me into the technology side because I knew that human rights could be embedded into the architecture of an application. You can literally code respect for human rights into software. You can make software that functions in a way which reinforces human rights. And yet, I've never seen anyone try to do it except for technological developments relating to WikiLeaks would be a good example. So that is where a few technologists tried to use technology and software, web-based applications, to provide channels for the reinforcement of human rights. Well, I wanted to do that on an industrial scale, on a scale that millions of people could benefit from. And with, like I said, nothing but that dream and some good friends, we've been working extremely hard on that ever since. Just to give you a little bit of background, I didn't become a technologist. I always was one by default because of my generation. So me being, I'm 45 now. Growing up, I started using a computer when I was probably 6 years old, an Apple IIe in primary school, and my cousin's Amiga 500, and playing on an Atari, and learning to administrate systems myself, because in those days you had to administrate your system yourself. This is the days before Microsoft operating systems. This is the days of DOS shell. This is where, in order to make your computer operate in a way to allow you to play your computer game, you had to be able to administrate your file system within DOS itself. So I got foundational technological knowledge um, as a matter of course. And then the earliest stages of the internet, as we know it, meaning like the news groups and the bulletin board services and things like that, and IRC and MIR, what became MIRC, um, which is Internet Relay Chat. For those people who don't know, this is the earliest days of internet messaging as we know it. That was when I was 11, 12, 13, and that's what my geek friends were doing, and so I was doing it too. And then my geek friends, one day, a few years later, realized that they could build an internet service provider and did so, and then began providing internet services to other people. And we used to network our computers together by sharing our MAC addresses because that was the only way we could create a network and things like this. So I'm just I just came about at a specific time that led me to accumulate what I would describe as foundational computing knowledge, which, as I went on through my career, because like I said, I became an activist by accident, not by ambition. And by that point, I was already 31. So my whole career had been in computing and technology, database administrator, software development, etc., software development manager, working with devs, working with coders on commercial platforms, on vacuous for-profit platforms that automated functions and put people out of jobs. Like that was literally what I was doing in my normie career before becoming an activist or a journalist. So for me, it's about taking that experience, taking those skills, and then applying them in a way that advances the cause of human rights in a modern day context. And in my activism in journalism, just as I described to you, tweet jockeying for the first live streamer in New Zealand, I knew social media because I had used social media as a tool to communicate information. So then taking my technological skills and experience and applying that to the to create solutions to address the issues with big tech in the realm of social media. That's what gave birth to Pancake. But it was also the result of years and years and years of conversations with extremely well-known whistleblowers and technologists. We commiserated endlessly amongst ourselves about all of the problems with big tech. Um, and again, for the second time, I would reference Cypherpunks by Julian Assange. If you read that book, even if you read the foreword to that book, there was a very real call to action there. Um, there was a warning and a call to action. And so I am just one of the people in this world who's read that book, heeded the warning, and accepted the call to action. And I'm lucky enough that that's resonated with other people and that they've lent their support to the effort. And voila, we have the Pancake project.
Now, without going into too much technical detail, yeah, I have a list here of I don't want to make it too technical for specific reasons, but we could on a future episode maybe dive more deeper into yeah. But I have here a whole list of no. I would like to a step back. Yeah. So first of all, I'm absolute convinced we need a decentralized Web3 based, blockchain based social media. So this is absolutely the future. Now there are attempts by different projects. So on top of my list is Blue Sky, of course. It's a bit fishy because it's not really decentralized, and also, of course, the past of its founder. Yeah. Then Farcaster, then Lens Protocol, Mastodon, Decentralized Social. There's more, DTube, Aether, PeepPath, Pixelfed, etc., etc. So in a nutshell, and try to not to address a technical audience, yeah. So in a nutshell, what's the difference between, let's say, Talk Liberation's Pancake? I know you have multiple products, yeah, and that list of so-called semi-decentralized social networks.
If you sent your mother or your grandmother or your neighbor who doesn't know anything about computers or technology to the platforms on that list, would they be able to use them? If you sent your mother to Mastodon, what's the chances that she's going to work out how to self-host a Mastodon node and operate a decentralized social network?
Well, what about Blue Sky? It's relatively similar to Twitter.
Is your mother on Twitter?
My mother is 80 something. No.
That's exactly my point. My mother's 75, and my mother does not use Twitter and can't use Mastodon. Pancake was
No.
designed, Pancake has been designed for my mother and for my daughter and for my mother's friends and my daughter's friends. In fact, both my mother, this is something no one knows, both my mother and my daughter work for Pancake, both of them. So, in fact, they came up with the name Pancake together. My mother is a marketing manager, my daughter is a graphic designer, and together they came up with Pancake. So it has been, see, this is the problem. I saw a lot of this in Germany actually, because in Germany I spent a bit of time at the Chaos Communications Club. There are brilliant coders, open source technologists, and proprietary who build great functionality and great tools and great solutions, but they have absolutely no ability to do proper interface design for a wide audience. So you get solutions like Pond is one I can think of off the top of my head. Highly technical, but really, really critical. I mean, Pond is an awesome thing, but no way could the average person use it. It's almost like they create solutions in the image of themselves, right? They have a PhD, or they're like super duper coder, super duper technologist. They create something that actually only they could use. Um, they don't make something that is widely accessible. And this is a trend that you see across, particularly decentralized applications, because decentralized applications tend to be independent projects because the incentive isn't there for the big corporates to run decentralized networks in most cases, not in all cases, but in the overwhelming majority of cases. Pancake is extremely intuitive. You don't need to know how to use it. You don't need to learn how to use it. It's just all right there in front of you. And then the next thing you discover is that Pancake is a drag and drop interface. So all of the elements that you look at on the screen can be moved, resized, opened in front of the others, closed. It becomes your application. You can actually make it look however you want. You can put the
Hmm.
profile part wherever you want. You can put the timeline part wherever you want. It's very it's highly customizable, and it becomes very personal to the user. They in a way they're kind of creating their own social media application, but they're just doing it by dragging boxes around on a page and making things bigger and smaller. It's pretty cool. And when you look at the graphical side of the user interface, it's little cute anime characters and like cute colors. It's deliberately approachable to anyone of any age, and you can feel at home straight away. There's not
Hmm.
hidden menus. You don't have to click inside here and inside there and inside there. It's a super simplified version on the front end, but on the back end, it's protecting you every step of the way. And that's the real point of difference.
So that was the front end, let's say the user interface, yeah. But the technology behind it, that was what I actually was aiming for. So how is that different? And is it really decentralized? That's my question.
So there's two major factors as relates to decentralization. One is that it's a P2P network. So you are connecting to other devices who are also active on the network. You are passing data to and through those devices, and then that data is shared within the network. You're not connecting your device to a central server, which is the authority and the holder of the data and deciding who gets what data or doesn't get what data. So that's the first aspect of decentralization. The second aspect of
Yeah,
decentralization is that, as pertains to the blockchain, the users
yeah,
of the peer to peer network participate in the validation of the blocks that are published on the blockchain. They create what we
I
call
understand.
federations. And in those federations, they together agree upon the integrity of the data that then is published to the blockchain to create the shared public record of the activities of the users on the
Mm,
network.
yeah. So two questions, if you allow me. First of all, can any entity shut you down? And number two, is it secure against external state spying, whatever?
Um, can any entity shut us down? Well, they've been trying.
For example, if they shut down Talk Liberation, for example, the
They've been
company
trying.
Talk Liberation,
They've
will
been
it?
trying. They've been trying.
That's what I'm
So,
asking. That's what
so
I'm asking. Yeah,
um, look, the old is never going to be happy about the new. And that's why many times I say I don't want people to put all their hopes and dreams in Pancake. I don't want them to sit as passive audience members waiting to see if Pancake saves the world. I want them to get off their backsides and build their own projects so that we have a whole stable of solutions that together become a tide of change that's unstoppable. That's what I want. I don't want, oh, Suzie Dawson's going to save us. Suzie Dawson's probably not going to save you. Suzie Dawson's trying to save you, but probably can't. So you better participate in this process if you want success. That's the first thing. Um, can I say anything as an absolute? No, I'm not arrogant enough to say, oh, they definitely can't stop us. Oh, we're unstoppable. Like, that's just silly. Again, the resource imbalance is so huge that I definitely can't say that. What I can tell you is that we have done absolutely every possible conceivable thing that we can think of to the nth degree, actually, at every layer of the business to protect the business, to make it sustainable, and to make sure it will still be around in 3, 5, 7, 10 years. And we're 4 years in and we're still here. That's what I can tell you. But I can't
yeah,
I can't say what, institutions which are 100 years old and have hundreds of billions of dollars. I can't tell you what they can or can't do.
yeah. I'm asking because I'm aware of the banking freeze, which is one of the topics that I covered in my Substack articles. Tell us about your, how shall I say it, defense against this latest attack.
Well, it just goes to show that even when you obey all of the rules and you do everything right, the system, which is supposed to respect that you have played the game and done the things you're supposed to do, can arbitrarily decide that actually doesn't like you anyway and try to prevent you from having access to basic economic freedoms, for example. We did everything right. We have had accountants and lawyers administrating everything. We ourselves, our executives, do not put our hands in the kitty. We do not access the bank accounts and make transactions ourselves. Everything is done properly by the books and has been since day dot. We did everything right with the banks. We've done all of our compliance documentation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the bank still decided, once they realized that we were going to have incoming funds sufficient to complete our mission of building and integrating our blockchain, all of a sudden to, as would say, put the kibosh on that, and do so unceremoniously and in an unforgiving fashion, um, in the sense that we bent over backwards to try and work with them. We literally requested meetings, offered up additional documentation and communications. We really tried to work things out directly with them, and they just stonewalled, just flat out stonewalled. And we ended up having to go to drastic lengths to pay our existing bills ourselves without access to our funding. And we should have been in a strong cash position, and we ended up in a negative cash position because of the actions of the bank. And our community suffered as a result of that, and that was unjust. Not only is it unjust for our business and our supporters and the people who stand to our users, the people who stand to benefit the most from Pancake. It was actually unjust within the jurisdiction in which it was executed, meaning for Iceland itself, we had documented hiring plans. That money was going to be spent to employ people in Iceland to give them jobs doing fantastic stuff. That money was going to be pumped straight into the Icelandic economy. And when the bank froze it, that actually deprived Iceland, the Icelandic labor force, and the Icelandic economy of the benefit of that, as well as depriving us and our community. Uh, and we fought a very, very long battle before we eventually got the funds back, but by then they'd caused all kinds of damage to us. But I mean, we never once stopped working. That's something people should know. Um, we never once stopped working. We never stopped building. I hear Roger Ver told me, um, I think 2022, Roger Ver said to me, they can't stop you building. It's a direct quote. They can't stop you building. They can stop you doing many things, but they can't stop you building. And that really stuck with me. And that's been a mantra for me, that no matter what we face, no matter what opposition is thrown our way, we can, by sheer determination and commitment, continue to build. And that's exactly what we've done.
Suzie Dawson, I overstayed my welcome by magnitude, by factor of magnitude. It was my pleasure talking to you. There would be quite some things still. I mean, I have not even scratched on the surface on my list of topics here. I would be interested to pick this up, the Pancake talk liberation potentially in the future in another episode if you have time. But for today, I really thank you for your time. I think it's one of the more incredible stories that I've heard. I mean, I have now, I don't know, 150 interviews, all with incredible people, some of which you know. But I believe, especially for a single mom in a different country, being harassed, to say it politely, picking up her life in Russia and making something out of it. I mean, I can only say chapeau. Many people with much in a much better situation would have utterly failed. So keep your head high. You absolutely deserved it.
Thank you. I'm not huge on compliments, to be honest. I, as you said those things to me, all I was seeing in my head is all the people who are around me, all the people in my life who support me, who participate in what I'm doing, and who I feel are the reason why I'm able to achieve anything at all. Um, I'm grateful. I'm grateful to all the people who have had my back, who've given me a firm foundation where there wasn't one previously. So thank you to them. Thank you to everyone who helped to make this happen. I don't think I've ever done a part two before, but if we get the chance, sure, I'm happy to give it a go. Um, in the meantime, for all of my interesting life, the reality is I hang out at home with my kids and my dogs. I'm kind of boring. I actually really am kind of boring. And that's how I like it. It's exactly how I like it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best.
We turn now to the police raid on the DotCom mansion, so much discussed for so many months, and now the footage of that morning has begun to emerge. It generally shows what was always said to have happened, but it sheds little light on why it happened. The FBI is charging DotCom with internet piracy on a massive scale. He and his lawyers, both here and in America, assert no helicopters were needed to arrest him, no crack police officers with semi-automatic weapons, and the FBI not too far in the background. As the legal battle continues over a high court finding that the search warrants used in the raid were invalid, the raid itself is coming under scrutiny in the High Court. The evidence you will hear off camera in this story is from an elite police officer we cannot identify. Those involved are protected for their own safety and future operations unrelated to this case. But this is how that morning unfolded.
All call signs, all call signs. This is
6:47 a.m, the 20th of January this year, and the raid is underway.
copy.
A helicopter carrying members of the elite Special Tactics Group flies into the Coatesville home of Kim.com.
Ground units from gates are open.
.com's pregnant wife, their 3 children, some guests, and somewhere in the region of a dozen staff are also there. All is quiet below. Within seconds, 4 armed members of the Special Tactics Group run to the main door. The helicopter immediately leaves.
Hand lifting.
The main justification for using it at all, that .com's security staff would have stopped police vehicles at the gates.
Forward.
But as the chopper flies out, the first ground forces are already arriving in that van, just seconds behind. And inside,
First of all, it wasn't unusual for me to hear helicopter noise because we were expecting guests to arrive, and it's usual that sometimes guests arrive early in the morning, especially if they come from the US and are being picked up by helicopter. So the noise from the helicopter wasn't really a surprise, but then I heard pinging of stones, of rocks to my bedroom window. My shields were down, so I couldn't see outside what was happening. And then shortly after, within a few seconds, I had a heavy banging on my door.
Gate. Guard from main gate reports changeover was 6 o'clock. Only 2 guards working, 1 at the main gate, 1 roaming.
the helicopter is circling above, not directly involved any longer. It was recording police comms, the sound of the raid as it unfolded.
Yeah, made entry into the bedroom of the target. The door was closed, slammed, and it had a security lock on it. We breached it. Moved through. He's done a runner. We can't find him in either the studio or the bedroom.
I was on my bed. Once the banging started, I pressed an alarm button that is situated right at my bed, that was installed in cases of emergency. When I press that, it automatically sends a signal to all security guards and Mr. Tempero's room, including SMSs to everybody, informing them that there is an alert. And I then stood up from the bed and made my way to the Red Room.
He was in this room here, which we call the Red Room. And the reason will be obvious in a moment when I open the door.
Wayne Tempero, DotCom's head of security. This footage wasn't played to the court, it's from our interview in February. But what has been learnt in court is that despite knowing of the room's existence, having the plans, and the door to the room not being locked, it still took 13 minutes for the police to find DotCom here.
I was sitting in front of that pillar in that room, and then I heard loud banging noises, and I was just scared and worried.
Meanwhile,
Yeah, Roger. Revised numbers in the garage from the top part. We have 5 Philippine females and 3 children.
the house is being closed down. Everyone present is being accounted for and contained. Everyone.
We have the 5 nannies plus his children up in the top of the garage.
Roger that. Thank you.
By 7:10, armed officers are on the roof. Directly below them, Kim.com has now been found and detained.
The upper level's over.
I thought, I better wait for them to come to me rather than me popping out of that secret door and maybe, scaring someone who might shoot me. So I waited in the red room. I knew the door wasn't locked. There was a button that I could have engaged to lock the door, but I haven't done that. And I waited in the room upstairs and waited for them to come. And once they came up the stairs, I had my hands like this. And then very quickly they approached me, and within 2 seconds they were there and all over me.
When you say all over you, just what happened?
Well, I had a punch into the face, I had boots kicking me down to the floor, I had a knee into the ribs, and then my hands were on the floor. One man was standing on my hand.
For the log, Mr. .com has been shown the warrant to search the property. He acknowledges it.
7:11, 2 helicopters have been used.
I've got green light to utilise the dog.
Dogs are now being deployed. And you can now clearly see 1, 2, 3, 4 police vehicles. Police on the ground include the Armed Defenders Squad and the Special Tactics Group, who were armed with
a gun belt, which had my secondary weapon, a police issue Glock pistol, on the right-hand side, and additional magazines on the left. And my primary weapon, which is a Colt Commando M4 5.56 weapon.
The implement shed and containers attached have been cleared. No persons located.
If it all seems slightly American, the FBI were there on the day and during the planning period leading up to it.
Were any FBI officers present at any stage in your dealings with this matter during the week of the, what was it, the 16th of January?
Yes, sir.
Also recording that day, this camera in a tree above the house. It recorded the STG officers from the second helicopter, 5 of them also armed with semi-automatic weapons. Their 4 colleagues are already inside the house. They run to join them. Moments later, a dog handler arrives. Outside, more dogs, more men, more guns, including figures entering up the hill in the background. The house is surrounded, and this is a significant show of force. But curiously, the officers are not dressed in full combat gear. If the house and its occupants were such a threat, why not?
We wanted to match the threat level, in this case a low threat, with our dress. And we made that conscious decision not to wear full tactical kit. It wasn't appropriate in these circumstances.
So why such a show of force? Paul Davison QC spent the day trying to get to the bottom of that question. Exchanges were sometimes testy. In one instance, around the treatment of .com himself.
There was force applied.
Question is, did you see anything that you took? No need to look at counsel. Just look at me and answer the question. Did you see anything done to Mr. .com that was, to your mind, of a nature that was deliberate?
Yes, there was deliberate force applied.
But the larger issue remained less clearly answered. The Special Tactics Group, the Armed Defenders Squad, search warrants now declared illegal. What was behind such a large and pointed operation that morning? The police say...
Primary objective: secure suspect as soon as possible to prevent destruction of evidence.
But .com replies he couldn't have destroyed evidence even if he wanted to, because the FBI had seized their servers before the raid.
You know, all of that is so invalid and really angers me, because you know that the FBI was already in the data center disabling access to the data that they feared we would manipulate. So prior to you arriving and doing what you did, there was no chance for anybody to do anything with that evidence.
Yes, Roger, good to go with your last plan methodical clearance of the upper levels, over.
So, data already seized, threat risk low, and admission from within police ranks that the operation was, quote, over the top. What was it about, and why? The hearing continues tomorrow. That story was shot over the past 2 days in court by John Fleming and edited by Sarah Rowan.